Hi everyone, I'm so happy to come back with this old format on my channel, so let me introduce you to a very detailed guide of the full units and roster showcase, this time of Greenskins, hosting as well the new units introduced with the last DLC Omens of Destruction. Before that, I want to spoil you that I'm preparing for Monday a video that is such a long time I wanted to make, a beginner's guide to all Skaven Warp missile units. Since Creative Assembly doesn't make a roadmap, I will do it. And for Friday there will be a deep analysis of all the 4 categories of Dwarves generic heroes. That is personally one of my favorite factions, and the more I talk about Dwarves, the more happy I am. In the middle there will be the like usual tier maker ranking list. You will find out soon of which faction. So please feel free to support my channel if you enjoy my content, and we can start. Goblins with swords and shields. They are the most basic and the cheapest infantry of this roster, very easy to recruit because you need just the main settlement, but as soon as you get access to the first goblin military building, I would suggest you to move forward to their version with spears. Goblin with spears. They are the best filler of this roster. They are expandable, so if they run away, no problem. They are shielded, so no problem against missile attack. Then they are in large number, anti-large, and with the charge reflection and charge defense, so quite effective against light cavalry or to protect your flank. You can use them even in the mid-campaign if you want to build a goblin thematic army. And it's not true that the night goblins are better at any stats, because they have a little more armor. So if you need a cheap infantry just to flank and to protect some vulnerable part of your formation, they are the best choice even in the late campaign. Night goblins, they are better at any stats unless the armor than the normal goblins. They have stalk and vanguard deployment, so you can deploy them closer to the artillery of the missile units of your enemy and attack at the right time. Goblins fanatics, they're actually the same as the other night goblins, but they have this spinning gloom that is a very unique ability that can be very helpful before the other melee infantry is engaging you in combat. But they need a little of micromanagement because it's an active ability you have to use every time. Nasty Stalkers, not one of my favorite units, but apparently the community likes them very much. They are good to sneak around the enemy and attack them at their back because they are even a bonus in these circumstances, but you have to consider that they are very weak and they can go down very fast if you don't manage them correctly. Orc Boys, the first actually strong and tough melee infantry you will get access, but with a different building because it's about orcs. They are a very good option if you are building a thematic orc army. They are strong, tough, and they have better stats overall than goblins, so quite helpful. Orc Boys with spears. They've been introduced with one of the last patches, and they are a very good front line, very good to protect your flank. Basically the normal Orc Boys, but with the anti-large bonus, charge reflection and charge the flank. So use them wisely and they will do a very great job. Orc Goons. They are very controversial units, many people like them, many people don't. They're actually a second line support infantry specialized against infantry, so it can be very cool if you need infantry support, but at that point for Greenskins you have access to many monsters option that can be more effective at this job. Black Orcs with shields. They are the toughest infantry unit you can ask for your front line, and they have an ability that increase even more their melee defense, making them just indestructible. They are the ultimate late game infantry for your thematic orc army, and they are very cool. Black Orcs with great weapons. In this case they are more a support second line infantry. You can use them against a big target of heavy armor targets. They have an ability that increase their melee power in exchange of their defense, and they are very good in your late game for actually dealing with everything. Now let's talk about missile infantry. The first option you have access to are the Goblin Archers. They have in a large number, but their damage is very weak, so use them as long as you get access to this other unit. Night Goblins Archers. They are probably the best missile infantry of this roster. They have stalk and vanguard deployment, so you can use them in a more versatile way, and they have a poison effect. Even if they have the same damage of the normal goblin. With the poison effect, at least you can slow down and reduce the stats of your enemy. So good also as a support while your infantry is engaged against your enemy. In there they are shooting arrows at them. The Fanatics version, as I said, is the same with this ability called the Spinning Blooms, that since they are archers, so they don't engage in melee, it can be a little useless. Orc Boys Archers. Now be very careful, because we have to do a comparison between them and Night Goblins. They have more range and more damage, but they have less accuracy and less number. So if you want to do more effective long range damage, it can be good, but at the same time they lose the poison effect, they don't have the sulk, and the larger is less. So depends what kind of enemy you're facing. That can be your valuable option. I would suggest to use them in a more orc thematic army and the goblin in a more goblin thematic army. Goblin Wolf Riders. They're actually a very good unit, they're very good at their job, they are cheap, they are fast, so you can use them to harass enemy and then charge missile and artillery, and they can be quite helpful in the early and in the mid campaign. The Spiders Riders are slower than the Wolf counterpart, but they are better at any other stats, and they have poison attack. They are Striders, so you don't have to care about the terrain, forests and so on. They can be actually quite good at their job. But remember that being less fast, they will be more vulnerable to missile, and if someone will try to chase and charge them. The Goblin Squeak Riders are faster than the Spiders, but slower than the Wolves. They are good against heavy infantry, and they can actually stay in a little prolonged combat. But they have poor charge, and I would not suggest you have to manage them quite well, because when they start to take damage, it's very hard to take them away. The Orcs Bow Rider, they are the first tough cavalry of this roster. They are quite good at their job, slower than wolves and others cavalry, but at the same time they are stronger, tougher, they are shielded, and they can stay in prolonged combat a little more. The Biggoons Bow Riders, they are actually the same, but they are specialized against large units, so very strong against other cavalries or some kind of monsters, and they lose the shield, so you have to be more careful about missile attacks. The Orc Boar Chariots are a good unit of chariots, but don't expect it to overperform compared to other units of this kind. If you need some kind of anti-infantry, more powerful damage, maybe they are the right option, but be careful because they can be very easy to take down. The Goblin Wolf Riders Archers, they are the same as the normal Wolf Riders, but with less melee stats, and this missile attack then can be good at harassing enemies or to distract a large group of units, but at the same time you require a little more of management, because skirmish mode or not, they still, if they will find the right opponent against them, they can go down very fast. Spiders Riders Archers, they are slower than the wolves, and in this case it can be a problem if you have to use them to harass and in the skirmish mode. At the same time they have the poison effect that can slow down enemy, and at the right moment they can start to attack vulnerable units, but be very careful with them. The Goblin Wolf Chariots, they are still a good harassing units, they don't have the charge and the melee stats of the Orc Boar Chariots, but they can still do a great harassing jobs. Be very careful with them, because they go down very fast if they engage against cavalry or characters, but they are in a good number and they can still do quite well. The Pump Wagons is a unit that is not that loved by the community, but I can tell you that they are very cheap, easy to recruit because you need just your settlement, and in the very early campaign you can charge around very weak enemies and they can do a good job, so give them a chance. The version with the Flappas is faster, has a better charge, so it's very good against the weak infantry, and he has the Strider ability, so they will not care about forest, terrain and so on. They're actually a very good unit. In this case you require a building, but they can do quite a good job if you manage them correctly. The version with Spiky Rollers is made for being in prolonged combat compared to the other version. they lose the charge, the speed, but at the same time they have the sundered effect that lower the armor of the enemy nearby, so actually quite good as a support of other infantry. Now let's move to the artillery. The Goblin Rock Lobbers, they are a good catapult unit, but with very low accuracy if you play at high difficulty. You can use them for its range that is very high, but I mean, I would not cover your army of these units. Just one or two of them in the early campaign can be enough to have the range superiority and force your enemy to attack. The Goblin Ball Thrower are another very controversial units. You need to put them very far from your front line because they need a lot of time to actually deal damage. But they are in a good number, and over time they can be effective with the very right unit, with slow monsters, slow cavalry, and tall one, because they, as I say, they will need to attack even when your enemy is in the prolonged combat, is engaged in combat with your front line. So be very careful. You can give a chance to this unit, but not more than one per army. The Doom Diver catapults are the ultimate artillery of this roster. They have a good armor piercing damage. They are some guided projectiles that basically means more accuracy, and you can use them against the cavalry monsters, but I will not waste them against the weak infantry or even heavy infantry. Now let's talk about Beast. The Squid Earths are a good harassing units for the early campaign, but they have the rampage attributes that it's a problem for a unit weak like that, so I would get rid of them as soon as possible as you get access to other option. But as I say at the beginning, just to attack enemy around, to defend your weak flanks, especially if you're playing with Skarsnik, can be your only option available, and they can be a little funny to use and tricky for your enemy to take down. The Trolls are the first monstrous infantry you will get access. They have poor leadership and not that good melee stats, but they have regeneration, so they can be quite sturdy in the melee, and they can support your army from your second line quite effectively. So if you see that in one part of your formation you have a problem, you can send a unit of them targeting the enemy there, and they can do a good job. The River Trolls are the upgraded version of Trolls with the same regeneration but better melee stats, a passive ability, and they are more defensive. So helpful if you need a support for your front line to your flank. Actually very good as a flank to defend your flanks, and they are my favorite tall units because they do their job quite well, and at the same time they are very hard to take down. The Stone Trolls are the most elite version of Trolls. They have less melee defense stats, but they have more resistance like to missile, and they have better charge, better armor piercing damage, so quite useful as a support against other monsters, against heavy cavalry or heavy infantry. The Mangler Squigs are another very tricky units. They can be helpful as infantry support because you can just put them in your second line and attack when there is some troubles, but at the same time they explode. That it's a great thing for against your enemy, but not a good thing if you have even some allied units around. So be very careful, but if you see a troubling infantry in your enemy, they can be a good choice to tear them apart. The Giant is one of the least loved units of all these games, but they actually can be very strong against the right army, the right factions. If you deal against the missile focus faction, it can be a problem because they have low armor and they will go down very easily, but against melee focus faction they can be very strong. They are a little fast, they're effective against the characters, against other monsters, cavalry, so yeah, a good tank to absorb melee, just melee damage, and to deal a lot of damage. The Colossal Squig is definitely one of my favorite units of all these games. It's a very fast and high charging monsters that can just move around with this mass and attack everything, charge everything, and deal a lot of damage to everything. The only problem is its low armor, low defense, and the rampage trait that if you don't have a Night Goblin hero, it can be a problem, because at some point it will just lose control, and a beast big like that can be very vulnerable to missile attack. So be careful, take always, hold always a Night Goblin hero close to him, and he will do a very good job. The Ragnarok Spider is a very good unit because you can use it in multiple ways. It can be a tank, so you can put it in the middle of your front line and shooting arrows, poison arrows, or at the same time it's a good as anti-large focus monster, so you can deal with cavalry to defend, you can defend your flanks or attack another big monsters that is engaging your army. The Ragnarok Spiders with Flingers for me is one of the favorite units of this roster. It's like the Ragnarok Spider, so you can use it as a tank, as a flanker, but before that, before the engagement of the two front lines, you can use it as an artillery piece, and he has a good accuracy, a good damage. Of course, you can expect a lot of it through all the game, through all the battles, and that's why it's such a sophisticated structure units, and I love its introduction in the game. The only problem, the blue color. Now the Rogue Idol, one of the most expensive and sturdiest units of this roster. It's very hard to recruit, it needs a lot of turns, a lot of money, and at the same time I feel that its role in the game is not that effective. It's very tough, so it's very hard to take down, but he started to lose armor when he loses hit points, and his damage is very easy to dodge. If he will charge correctly, yeah, it will tear apart half of the unit, but many times you will see him just, and you know his animation just falling down and hit no damage, and yeah, it's very slow even in the animations of attack, and it can be a problem for the time. If there are no missile units, no specialized units against them, strong characters, probably it's so hard to take down that it justifies its high cost and everything. But if you are playing against dwarves, empires and so on, he's probably the worst cost-effective option you can make in your army. But yeah, funny. Okay, I will talk about Savage Orc just one time, because I feel that if you explain why they are different, then you can just duplicate this explanation to any units of their little roster. The Savage Orc have more melee stats, they're better melee stats except the defense. They have the Frenzy ability, so another increase in their stats, and then they have a physical resistance of 25% given the less armor. So now, how to use them effectively? For me, depends a lot and they are immune to psychology, so good against monsters and so on. So how to use them in the proper way? For me, it depends a lot on the faction you're fighting against. If you're fighting against very large numbers armies like Skaven, they can just surround you and make attack you from multiple ways. It can be, even if they have the physical resistance, it can be a problem. Instead, if you're playing against for example dwarves, so more little number and they're tougher anyway, they can be more effective, because with the physical resistance they will not take a lot of the armor piercing damage of the dwarves, for example, just an example, for example, or even of other missile units, so on. But yeah, you have to consider the very low armor, so if you are attacking units in large numbers or even with large arrows, it can be a problem. If the unit has magical attack like demons, it can be a problem, so it's better the other version. So what to use them? Yeah, probably to Empire, to Dwarves, to Ogre Kingdoms, and yeah, all the faction that they are probably more defense, more armor piercing damage, less numbers, and no magical attacks.